The light she kept broken. The corridor had been cold for 11 days. Not broken cold. The ventilation panels still breathed somewhere behind the walls. But in this particular stretch of the Empress's private corridor, the air moved like water under ice. Still. Pressureless. The arched ceiling above disappeared into shadow, and the ornate carvings along the walls, animals no longer living, constellations no one had named in centuries, existed only as texture in the dark. Fen Calloway, or 29 Electrician, leaned in the way of someone who spent most of his life in crawl spaces and panel alcoves, unclipped his hand torch from his belt and pressed it into a wall bracket near the open panel. Warm yellow light flooded the corridor. Not the clinical white of station strips, something older, something with weight. And he crouched in front of the exposed wiring and said, quiet as a man alone, "Right. Which one of you is the problem tonight?" His fingers were ink-stained at the knuckles, repair logs always bleeding into his skin. He didn't look up when the footsteps came. She came every night at the same hour. The Empress, 6'1", lavender skin catching the torchlight like it was made for it. Her silver and gold armor dress moving without sound. The cracked marble texture of it carved into something almost organic. Her crown, golden filigree, a web pattern, sat above long black hair that fell straight to her waist, and at the very tips of that hair, something Fen had noticed on the second night. Color. Deep violet, shifting, alive. She stopped. He nodded, went back to the wires. She shouldn't have filed it low priority. The fault had a 3-day fix window at medium. She had marked it low, the highest-ranking lie in the station. Little Avon materialized from the corridor behind her. 6 years old, barefoot. When clutching a stub of drawing chalk, eyes fixed on the torch like it was the only star left. He sat on the floor near Fen's toolbox without asking. Fen didn't shoo him away. There are stories that shouldn't pull at you, and this one already has. If something in this corridor already feels like yours, subscribe and stay. The next night is longer. 3 nights later, Fen still hadn't found the fault, because there wasn't one. He'd checked the main line twice and the secondary splice 4 times, and every wire in that panel was perfect. Clean connections, no burn, no corrosion, nothing that matched a work order. He sat against the wall with the panel open in front of him, torch casting its yellow circle on the ceiling, and across the corridor Avon had fallen asleep against the toolbox, chalk still in his fist, head tipped sideways, breathing the deep, loose way of children who trusted a space completely. Fen pulled his jacket off and draped it over the boy. He didn't look at the bench when he did it, but he was aware of her there, the way you're aware of a fire in a room, not from looking, from warmth. He leaned back against the wall. The wiring's fine, you know. Her posture shifted, not toward him, away, a degree, the movement of someone choosing not to move. There's no fault. There never was. Silence. The hum of the station beyond the sealed doors, pressed in from all sides. Then why do you keep returning? Work order's still open. He looked at Avon, then at her. Also, your nephew keeps drawing pictures of me fixing things and sliding them under the service door. I've got 11. He draws me taller than I am. A beat. I appreciate it. Her lips moved towards something. Not quite a smile. Almost its shape. The suggestion of one. Like a door not opened but tried. She held it back. At the tips of her hair, gold flickered. Bright. Involuntary. Then pulled back to violet. as if she'd caught herself. He knew the wiring was fine. She knew he knew. Neither said it again. The silence was the agreement. The next night the corridor was lit. Every panel, cold white light, even in full, flooding the arch ceiling and the wall carvings and the stone bench and everything in it. The station engineer was already packing up when Fenn arrived. Got priority bumped, fixed in 20 minutes. Well, easy job. Fenn stood at the entrance and looked at the bright corridor. No shadows, no bench in the dark. He walked in anyway, collected his tools from the alcove, the ones he'd staged there 3 nights ago, giving himself a reason to come back. He was thorough about it, didn't rush. When he passed the bench, he stopped. Avon had scratched something into the stone. A stick figure, crude and certain, holding what could only be a torch. Fenn pressed his thumb against it once. Then he picked up his bag and walked out. Behind a sealed door at the far end of the corridor, the Empress stood and watched him go. She had not ordered the repair. Her chief of staff had security concern, 12 days dark. She said nothing. That night she sat on the bench in the fully lit corridor. The Kelvathi hair-tip pigments work on biochemistry alone. Gold for safety, violet for honesty, the body confessing what the rank forbids. In full brightness, surrounded by correct light, hers had turned violet so deep they were almost black. She reached under the armrest of the stone bench. His hand torch. Left 3 nights ago. She had not mentioned it when he'd gathered his tools and he hadn't asked. She clicked it on. Warm yellow fell across her armored knee. Someone fixed what she had broken on purpose. The bright corridor felt like a betrayal. The bench was wide enough for 2. She sat in the center. Not her side, not his, but the middle, in as if choosing a side would admit there have been sides. You already know she's going to break the lights again. Subscribe, and tomorrow night watch what it costs her. She filed the new work order at dawn. Electrical fault. Empress's private corridor, low priority. Fenn received it with his morning assignments, a thin slip between 2 routine panel checks on the station's lower deck. He read it once, set it down, read it again. The wiring in that corridor was perfect, like someone had just fixed it 2 days ago. He knew this because he'd been the one to confirm the fix himself, standing in clean white light with nothing left to repair. He clipped his torch to his belt and went anyway. The corridor was dark, every panel dead, not failing, not flickering, simply off. The air had that same cold stillness, the arch ceiling gone to shadow, the carved wall animals returned to texture and suggestion. She was on the bench, Avon beside her, legs dangling, clutching a folded drawing in both hands with the seriousness of a child delivering a document of state. Fenn stood in the doorway. He clicked his torch on. Warm yellow filled the corridor. She looked at him. At the tips of her long black hair, violet bled slowly into gold. Not a flash this time, not caught and pulled back. A tide. Unhurried, honest. Avon dropped off the bench and crossed the corridor at a run, pressing the drawing into Fenn's hands. 3 stick figures in a dark hallway. 1 tall one holding a torch, 1 small one, 1 wearing a crown, all 3 together, no space between them. Fenn looked at it for a long moment. She broke the lights a second time. Her chief of staff would see this work order. Everyone would know. That wasn't an excuse anymore. That was a confession. He folded the drawing carefully and slid it into his chest pocket. Walked to the bench. Left space between them. A deliberate, respectful distance, and the kind that acknowledges someone without crowding them. He set the torch on the bench between them, angled upward, light spreading across the arched ceiling above. She watched him do it, said nothing. After a long moment, she said, "On my world, an empress does not sit in the dark with someone beneath her station." He nodded. "Let it settle." "On my world," she said quieter, "she also does not keep a stranger's torch under her armrest for 2 days." He didn't fill the silence. When he understood that she was not asking for a response, she was simply saying the true thing out loud, perhaps for the first time, perhaps to hear what it sounded like in air rather than in the corridor of her own chest. Her hair tips held gold, steady and unguarded, and Fen Calloway, who talked to wires and drew repair logs in ink that stained his knuckles, understood that what she had just handed him was not a confession. It was the whole weight of her rank, set down quietly on a stone bench in the dark. "I just go where the work order sends me," he said. She looked at him. Something in her settled. Not collapsed, not broken. Settled. The way a thing does when it finally stops holding against a current. Avon fell asleep across both their laps sometime after that. Neither of them moved. His head rested against her armored knee, feet draped over Fen's leg, chalk-stained fingers loose around nothing. The drawing was in Fen's pocket. The torch sat between them on the bench, pointing upward, casting its warm yellow circle on the ceiling. Her hair tips held gold, steady, unflickering, the first time they had stayed one color through an entire silence. "I could actually fix the lights," Fen said. "For real this time." "I know. Do you want me to?" She looked at the torch between them, at Avon's sleeping face, at the dark corridor she had kept broken, and then fixed, and then broken again. 12 days of low-priority lies that had never really been about the wiring. "No." He nodded once, reached over and clicked the torch off. The corridor went dark, and in the dark, her hair tips were the only light. Soft gold, steady, the color that meant safe, the color her own biology had no way to argue with. It wasn't a choice. It was already done. The torch between them on the bench was no longer a work tool, no longer an excuse, no longer the reason he came. It was simply the thing that had been there at the beginning, the light that started it, now sitting quietly in the dark while something warmer held the room. Outside the sealed doors, the station hummed on, indifferent. Inside, nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. That torch has been sitting between them this whole time, and you felt every second of it. If this corridor stayed with you, subscribe and come back tomorrow. What does an Empress do the morning after she chooses darkness over her station? The next story is already waiting.